The previous episode ended with a group of bandits attacking them, and one of them fired an arrow, but William managed to notice it at the last moment and protected Renee from it. Here, one of the guards shouted, "Duke of the Bandits, please be careful!" But suddenly the bandits surrounded them. So William said to Renee, "Please stay here, my wife, and no matter what happens, don't come outside." Then he left, but she felt nervous and started calling out to him, saying, "Wait." Then she said to herself, "Am I supposed to be so weak that I have to rely on the help of my enemy? I am trembling at my own helplessness." Then she looked around and said, "If I had a weapon, I could protect myself a little." Suddenly, she was stunned when she found a pair of scissors, so she said, "I might be able to use this as a last resort." So she took it and looked at it nervously. But suddenly, one of the bandits entered and said, "Hello, beautiful." Here, William turned around quickly after hearing Renee's scream, and here he saw that one of them was holding Renee and putting a knife to her neck, and she was saying, "Stop, everyone, or you will hurt your lady." Here, William shouted the name Luna, and here this girl said, "Put down your swords, and if you don't, you will lose your lady's head." Here, William looked at her nervously and in silence. Then he did as she said and told everyone, "Everyone, drop your swords." After they did, she said, "This lady is very brave. Even when a knife is put to her throat, she doesn't make a sound." Here, Renee was looking at her angrily. At the same time, the leader of the bandits completed and said, "And to think that she would put a scratch on this body." Then she asked her followers and said, "Drag them all here." Here, Renee said to herself, "To be able to defeat trained knights and nobles so easily, who in the world is he?" And here the bandit leader said to William, "Well, were you raised so sheltered that you don't even know how to bow properly?" And suddenly, she put her foot on his leg and said, "That cold-blooded bastard from Fulton Long fell in love with that count's daughter and married her, didn't he?" William felt a surge of anger. At the same time, the bandit leader finished and said, "Let's just see how hot and wonderful your wedding night together will be. Should we check? If you don't want anything to happen to your wife's neck, then that's it." Here, Renee watched what was happening and said to herself, "High heels? Regardless of how well this road is paved, a thief wouldn't wear high heels on a mountain." Here the bandit leader approached and said, "That cold-blooded bastard from Fulton Long fell in love with that count's daughter and married her, didn't she?" So she started tearing at his clothes and said, "Let's just see how hot and wonderful your wedding night together will be." Then she looked at him. At the same time, Renee was astonished and said to herself, "This is strange. How can a criminal behave so rudely towards the Duke of the Kingdom? They even threatened to kill his Duchess." So in anger, she interpreted what was happening and said, "It doesn't seem like money is their goal. Instead, it seems like they're toying with the Duke, someone who wears high heels in defiance of the rugged mountain terrain, someone bold enough to dare to deploy men to attack someone traveling to the royal capital, someone who can insult a duke without batting an eye and get away with it. There's only one person in the kingdom of Bahogan who can do that." Suddenly, Renee said to the bandit leader, "Your Majesty Queen Luna Louboutin, greetings to your Royal Highness, Princess." But she smiled and said, "Let me correct you." Then she took off the mask she was wearing and said, "Luna Louboutin was your previous name." Then she said, "Isn't her way of thinking wonderful? How clever she is. What a pity to introduce you to Fulton Long." Then she asked one of her followers to remove the knife and leave her. When he did, Renee bowed to her and said, "I am grateful that you were able to recognize my worth." But she suddenly laughed at what she had said. Then she grabbed her face and moved closer to her and said, If you don't like Fuchelong, how about becoming one of my concubines?" But suddenly William shouted at her, saying, "Princess Gloria!" Then in anger he said, "Get your hands off my wife now!" Here Princess Gloria looked at him, smiled, and snapped her fingers at her followers to leave him, saying, "My goodness, I forgot about you there for a moment." When they released her restraints, Renee said to herself, "I heard that the Duke and the Princess had a close relationship." Then she looked at them and said, "But I didn't think he would address her in such a rude or informal manner. What kind of relationship do these two people have?" Here, William stood in front of her and she looked at him. Here, William said to Princess Gloria, "What is the meaning of this, Princess Gloria?" Here, Gloria smiled and said, "If you dare to make me wait, then you have to bear the consequences of my bad mood that you will cause. Isn't that right, Duchess of Futulong? Here. Renee bowed and said nervously, I would like to thank you for coming to see us. Here, Gloria smiled and said, That's right. Look, this is what proper manners look like. It's very good for a stray dog who doesn't even recognize the master holding the meat in front of him. This angered William, and he said, What did you say? Here, Renee stopped him from making any mistakes, looking at Gloria and saying, Your Highness, forgive my rudeness during your conversation, but because of the recent skirmishes, many knights have been injured and are exhausted. Please show your compassion for their weak state and grant us permission to prepare quickly to travel to the village. Gloria smiled and said, What you say is reasonable. At the same time, she thought to herself, Just a few words, and she managed to ease the situation and control the scene. In addition, she's prepared public opinion in her favor. Instead of just being someone's wife, she's more suited to wield power in her own right. She's wasted as a simple tool. Meanwhile, the guard told Renee, We can transport the injured using Futulong's carriage. Then he asked, What about your Highness and the Duke? Gloria told them, You can ride in the carriage with me. How lucky I am that I decided to ride alone. As soon as all the arrangements are made, come here. I'll be waiting for you. After leaving them and finishing consulting with someone, Renee bowed to her and said, Your Highness? So she asked her in surprise. And what about the Duke? Here, Renee told her. He went to change his clothes. Gloria lowered her head and said, I understand. Then she told Renee, It's a pity what happened at Libutin Castle. The Duke is currently investigating the matter, so I hope you don't worry too much. But her words made her feel uneasy, and she thought to herself, Duke Futulong is investigating? If he's in charge of investigating his own crimes, nothing will happen. Then she lowered her head and said, I sincerely hope the truth is revealed as soon as possible. However, there's one thing I don't quite understand, Your Royal Highness. Duke William was present at the time of the incident. So, I don't understand why he's been put in charge of investigating this case. Here, Gloria smiled and said, Such impressively thoughtful questions or doubts about the Duke's identity are things I can personally tolerate. It was your birthday, wasn't it? So, by His Majesty's order, the Duke sent a representative of the royal family to celebrate the birthday of the heir of the county of Libutin. I understand you're worried because everything that could be considered evidence has been burned to ashes in the flames of that fire, but I hope you don't doubt the king's generosity. Here, Renee said to herself nervously, a royal representative? That means if I make any accusations without proof, I can be accused of insulting the royal family, regardless of how much they bark at each other. Duke Vitulong is one of their people. Is that what you're telling me? So she bowed to her and said, I will keep that in mind, Your Royal Highness. At the same time, she thought to herself, I'll take this opportunity to look into his investigation materials. Here, when William returned, Gloria looked at him and smiled, saying, Well, let's get ready to leave, as the Duke has also arrived. He nodded in agreement. Then Gloria said, The Duke will accompany me to the palace. He must be punished for the rude behavior he displayed in the forest. He bowed to her and said, I apologize, Your Royal Highness. Then she looked at Gloria and said, And Duchess, you can take this carriage to Vitulong Castle. I will send you an invitation to visit the royal palace soon, and you can look forward to our day of meeting again. And Renee replied, Yes, Your Royal Highness. When Renee left alone, Gloria said to William, The prince's movements were unusual. In the aftermath of the Libutin incident, the prince began actively gathering nobles to his side. And if only I had known that Luna Libutin would be such an important figure who would shake everything up, I wouldn't have agreed to give her up. I won't forgive failure, as the price will be very high. You must make me sit on that throne no matter what. Do you understand, William Vitulong? He looked at her angrily and said, As long as my conditions are met, I will make sure to fulfill the end of the agreement. Don't worry, Princess Gloria. The scene then changes to the Duke of Vitulong's castle in the capital. A servant in this castle said, I heard that the Duke and Duchess of Vitulong have arrived in the capital. Then this person said, Is that true? Then he put down his teacup and said, They're a little behind schedule. Then he stood up as the maid said. The Duke said he would go directly to the palace with the princess, and the Duchess is coming directly to Vitulong Castle. Then this person said, Very well. Bring me my coat. I must go out and welcome the Duchess.